Well, welcome everybody to today's workshop with Databricks. We're incredibly excited that you're here today and appreciate you spending time with us. We're going to be talking about data intelligence for healthcare interoperability. We're going to take a broad view of the industry around interoperability and the potential of leveraging all of it. And then we're going to be focusing on a particular use case around modernizing prior authorization. So I'm going to be your host today. My name is Adam Crown. I look after our healthcare business here today. I'm going to walk you through what to expect from today's session, how to engage with us, how to ask questions, and of course, let us know how we can be of help in answering any questions you have today. So first and foremost, everybody's connections will be muted, but you have an opportunity to engage with us in the Q&A panel in the Zoom window. So down at the bottom has Q&A. Feel free to ask questions throughout today. We have experts behind the scenes who are going to be able to take those live. Now, in the event we can't answer those questions live, we're more than happy to follow up with you to make sure you get the information that you need. We're also going to be answering or asking some survey questions throughout today's session. So towards the latter half of today's presentation, we love to get a better understanding of how folks are thinking about interoperability, how they're thinking about regulatory considerations, and of course, how that's impacting their organization. So please let us know if there's anything that is relevant for your organization as those questions do come up. So a few things to take away from today. We're going to be walking through what are some of the key components around some of the upcoming regulations for interoperability and particularly prior authorization. We're going to be talking about why that's important. And of course, from a data and AI perspective, why is that hard for organizations to accomplish today? And then we're going to walk through how Databricks and ecosystem partners are the best place to help you address those mandates. So first and foremost, we're going to be talking about the role of FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, as well as how Databricks and Exponential data help support this. We'll be talking about real-time data connectivity with the electronic health record. So think about things like Epic, Cerner, Athena Health, Meditech, and beyond, and how we can leverage that data to make faster decisions. We're going to be leveraging some of the great work that partner Redox has done today. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about how data intelligence helps you move faster and democratize access to all of your data to an even larger audience within the organization who may not have had access to that data prior. So when we think about today, we're going to be talking about the context of interoperability. We'll be talking about standards and how that data today can be leveraged to be able to address things like the CMS interoperability and prior authorization final rule. Because at the end of the day, we believe if we can pull all of this data together around the patient, we can unify data, we can secure and govern it holistically, we can infuse it with intelligence and make it available to everybody that surrounds the patient. And that's going to help us ensure better outcomes and experiences for patients and members. It's going to help reduce the administrative burden on clinicians as well as staff. And it's ultimately going to help change the way that patients are able to live and obviously be healthy. So without further ado, we're incredibly excited about today's presenters. We have Gail Hamilton, who's the Senior Product Manager at Redox, who's going to also be presenting with Tim Kessler, who's Field CTO. Adnan Jabber, who's Interoperability Engineer Lead, as well as Gaurav Suri is the Chief Solutions Officer for Healthcare at Exponential Data. They're going to be talking through how they're seeing things evolve in industry. And then lastly, we'll have Matthew Giglia, who's a Delivery Solutions Architect, as well as Aaron Zavora, who's a Senior Industry Solutions Director for Databricks, talk about how we can leverage all of this data to be able to address some of these very specific use cases around the CMS interoperability mandates. So without further ado, I'd like to pull in Aaron Zavora, who's our Senior Technical Director for Healthcare, to set the stage for today and get us officially kicked off. So Aaron, without further ado, over to you.
No, thank you, Adam. Super excited to be here, everybody. And thank you for coming. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. Also want to thank our partners. Having worked with both Exponential Data and Redox, I can't say enough great things about them. They've been great to partner with and have some great solutions in this space. So really looking forward to their content a little bit later on. For those of you who are new, we're going to do a quick introduction from an agenda perspective of what Databricks is, where we came from, what we're doing. And for those of you who are familiar with this, just sit tight for a couple minutes while we get through that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what specifically you can do within the context of prior authorization and interoperability on Databricks. From there, we'll have Exponential data talk a little bit more about FHIR and specifically interoperability and all the use cases you can unlock from it. From there, we'll have the Redox team join us and talk about how do you unlock real-time data connectivity with your EHR bidirectionally. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with a demo to show holistically what we're doing on the platform with all of our partners and ecosystem connectivity here. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A, as Adam already touched on, ways to submit your Q&A, and we'll save some of those questions for the end. So without further ado, I want to jump into just a brief background on Databricks. And the way I encourage customers and prospects to think about Databricks is that essentially Databricks started out as a data lake. What our founders did, and there were some students at UC Berkeley trying to win a recommendation engine competition at Netflix. What they built in open source was Apache Spark. And Apache Spark is the de facto way to do big data processing. And so this engine runs across all the major clouds. And so when you think about Databricks, we're this data lake for building models for interactive data engineering and data science. And over the years, what Databricks has done is built out a lot of the capabilities that exist in a data warehouse, saying that we don't need two different technologies to be able to accomplish these two primary things that we would want to do. A lot of our data warehousing and a lot of the things we would do on the data lake with machine learning and advanced AI. And so that was our foundation, and we've done a lot since then. You can see some of our open source solutions here on the right, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. But very simply, Databricks has this point of view that the winner of every industry will be a data and AI company, right? And if you think back to some of the early winners of data and AI, these were the Googles, the Microsofts, the Facebooks of the world. They have done tremendously well in their industry and been very successful because they've used data and AI as their competitive advantage in the industry. Likewise, you look at the more recent examples like Uber, Airbnb. So the point here is if you look at the healthcare industry, our healthcare industry has been embedded with data for a very long time. So the first programming languages around data go back to the 1960s at a hospital in Massachusetts to actually start to work with healthcare data. And the way that a lot of our customers think about Databricks is the way to say we're entrenched in all these really legacy technologies that are decades old. And so how do we start to modernize our approach and our data strategy, right? And if you look at today where a lot of organizations fit is they have a lot of different technologies to do all of these different capabilities on different platforms. And so it's really difficult to realize this vision due to this complex nature of having and maintaining all these platforms. And I want to highlight three things associated with it. Is one, just that your data and AI are typically siloed. When you have an architecture that looks like this, it becomes very difficult to move off of a single source of truth. Additionally, when you look at all these different technologies to govern, you're applying and maintaining different governance rules across each technology, which becomes very difficult to maintain and go forward with. And lastly, in order to be able to stitch all these technologies together, you're dependent on a highly technical staff to make them work cohesively, and there's a high friction handoff between all of these technologies. And so Databricks has a different way with the Lakehouse. And I think it's important to call out that part of the Lakehouse vision is to be an open, unified place for all of your data. And what I mean by open is to say on the previous slide, Databricks has tools and technologies that solve all of those bubbles we saw. But part of being open is to say that if a customer or a prospect has a technology they really want to use, very often they're substituting that architecture in with Databricks. So Lakehouse integrates really well with other technologies as well. And so if we look at the foundation of the Lakehouse, it's really important to call out that at the end of the day, we want our customers to own all of the data. So all of your data is stored on cloud object storage, which is the cheapest place by far to store data, right? So it lives in your cloud tenant. And then on top of that, we did a couple things to make the data lake look more like a data warehouse. The first thing is, if you look at Spark and its origins of big data processing, it was really great at crunching big amounts of data. With Delta Lake technology, and this is a storage format for your data, and it's also open sourced, what it does is it gives you the ability to do two very important things that make your data lake act like a data warehouse. One is it provides you the ability to do what we would call ACID transactions, so being able to do concurrent updates, deletes, and inserts. It allows that concurrency across all of your transactions on your data. Secondly, it provides the ability for Spark to not only process large amounts of data, to run very small point queries very efficiently. Queries that would return 1 or 2 or 5 rows are able to be really efficient thanks to Delta Lake storage format. On top of that, we built a governance tool called Unity Catalog. This has been open sourced by Mate at our Data and AI Summit. He did it on stage. He switched our repository from private to open source right in front of everybody. It was pretty cool to see. But Unity Catalog is a way to say I can govern not only all my traditional things I would find in a data warehouse, like your rows, columns, tables, and views, but I can now govern things like streams and REST endpoints and models and files. And so it gives you this holistic way to say, here's all of my data ecosystem, and here's how I govern all of that in one place. And then lastly, this helps unlock all of our use cases on top, from data warehousing, BI and ETL, data science and AI, and orchestration. So this is our Lakehouse foundation. And that's kind of where we were probably about a year and a half ago. We started out with this lakehouse, or we had this lakehouse that unified the data lake and data warehouse. And Databricks acquired a company called Mosaic. And Mosaic specialized in what we would call generative AI and the new LLMs. And so we launched the data intelligence platform, saying that we're going to take this generative AI capability, embed it into the platform, and make your platform more productive for your teams. And so if you think about the Lakehouse Foundation here, what Mosaic and this data intelligence platform mean is we're embedding a data intelligence engine within the platform that understands who's running what queries, what metadata exists in what tables. And so it makes your teams more productive. If I'm going to find similar data sets across an entire organization, your data intelligence engine is partnering with your teams to help your teams actually solve those problems without having to talk to bespoke individuals all over the organization. So that's one way that generative AI is helping customers today. The second way I would say that I would position how we think about data intelligence is that we are enabling our customers through Mosaic to actually build and train and fine tune their own generative AI models. And where we see the organizations today is a lot of organizations will start with an OpenAI or an Anthropic or a Google. And so these are great models because they've been built and vetted, and they're widely available, and they're really easy to start using. But at the end of the day, your competitive advantage isn't having access to OpenAI. All of your competitors have access to OpenAI, right? So with Mosaic and the idea to use your data to fine tune LLM specific to your organization is going to be your competitive advantage in the industry. So that's a very key part of our Mosaic acquisition and platform, is to enable our customers to be able to actually work with their own data and build these best-in-class models. So I want to switch gears here just a little bit, just to kind of level set on what we talk about interop standards, especially in healthcare. And so you might be familiar with some of these, and if you're not, just a quick kind of level setting here. These, I would say, are the 5 common standards we see a lot in data. Starting with HL7v2, you see these often in a hospital system, and this is usually data in flight between the different interface engines of a hospital system. And so sometimes when we have customers working with HL7v2 data, they're working with data that's kind of in real time, like an ADT feed. We also have HL7 CDA messages, which were this XML structure. And so it's the idea that this data is more static, in the sense of, if I asked for a dump of a patient's history of 2 years of information from an EHR, right? This is kind of the output that you would see as more that CDA document type. Latest and greatest is FHIR, right? That's where the industry is going. And I would encourage you to think about FHIR in 2 different ways. And its base is it's a JSON structure for the most part. But FHIR has essentially what I would call a schema behind it to say, here's all the fields that reside within FHIR. And on top of FHIR, what you see in the industry, if you look at things like DaVinci, you see what were called implementation guides, meaning that, for different versions of FHIR, like R4, R5, or a new version, you have different ways that you would implement things, like here's what a prior authorization would look like on the latest implementation guide, right? So 2 components, the schemas, as well as how the industry is recommending these different components to be implemented, called implementation guides. DICOM simply is medical images with metadata tags, very common in the healthcare industry for image data. And lastly, EDI transactions. And so EDI just being, here's my 837, a claim submission to a health plan, or my 835 claim payment, 834 is eligibility. And they're kind of look like an HL7v2 message with an additional layer, which we would call looping, right? So when we talk about healthcare industry standards and interoperability standards, this is what we're talking about, is this breadth of data formats. It's also important to note that our customers, we have customers working with each one of these data sets on Databricks too, which speaks to the power and complexity of Databricks itself. Moving into, I would say, more positioning how you would think about interoperability from data coming into Databricks. And, at the end of the day, a lot of the data that comes in is coming from a lot of the source systems. These sources could be EHR or external vendors, Redox, and we'll hear more from them later on. They play a critical role in being able to actually ingest this data into Databricks. So they take different formats, able to standardize it into FHIR format, and land it into what we would subscribe to at Databricks, called the Medallion architecture. And this is just a simple way to think about how data would flow from kind of ingest to something where it's actually being made ready to have an impact in the business. And so we call bronze is kind of that raw layer. So we could have FHIR messages coming in this layer. In the middle, we would say, hey, if I wanted to start to clean and aggregate and standardize this data a little bit further, we would call that a silver zone. And one thing I'm going to call out with our silver zone and call out with ingesting FHIR and working with FHIR is we build an open source technologies. Our technology for working with FHIR is called dbIgnite. Exponential Data has made some major contributions to dbIgnite to make working with FHIR data sets a lot easier to do, right? And a way to think about gold is to say, hey, once I have my FHIR data from my sources, I've been able to clean and aggregate it. Now from there, what are all the business use cases I can unlock given this kind of standard information? I can do things like real-time patient flow. I can do things like building an OMOC common data model. I can do predictive length of stay based upon an admission. So there's a lot of capabilities that you can have based upon actually being able to work with this data pretty easily. Likewise, going the other direction, interoperability is not just inbound, but also outbound. So say I have all this great information inside of Databricks, right? I have a nice aggregated adverse events table, and I want to make sure that everybody knows about these adverse events or risk factors to democratize that. Again, with dbIgnite and contributions from exponential data, I'm actually able to take relational data sets stored in Databricks Delta format and using a low-code, no-code solution, be able to map that data into standard FHIR formats, whether it's R4 or R5, and write to all my downstream systems, whether that's different vendors I'm writing to, or specifically Redox to write back into specifically an EHR, right? So the capability to actually take all of my great insights, and they're not just locked in my platform, I can actually share them across different parts of my ecosystem, even externally, right? So how do we make these things really easy to work with? Cool. Now I just want to switch gears here a little bit to the topic of prior authorization. And so when I talk about modernizing prior authorization, I want to just level set first on prior authorization, then get into some of the mandates, and then dive into what are some of the things that we see customers and other individuals in the industry working to actually better the prior authorization process in healthcare. But at the end of the day, if we talk about prior authorization, if you're not familiar with it, prior authorization is between a provider and a health plan. And here we have the provider in the blue dots. So given a patient visit, the patient comes in and the provider might subscribe a service, and that service would not be allowed to be administered until the health plan would approve it. So we would call that a prior authorization, meaning you have to have authorization from the health plan prior to that service being done. Given that intake process, right? So that intake process would send that information into the health plan. That health plan would then do a step to say, hey, for this specific request, is this service covered under this member's benefits administration, right? So there's a whole step to say, is this service even covered? Additionally, what typically happens is there's this back and forth that happens between the health plan and the provider, where the health plan will often reach out to the provider and ask for additional information about the service, right? So there's a little bit of back and forth that happens here. And then at the end of the day, there's a review to say, is this the right care plan or not? And so what the health plan will do is they'll either approve the services or they'll modify the services, or they'll recommend a separate care plan, right? And so this is kind of your general flow, a little bit of a naive view of how that prior authorization works in healthcare. And the reason why these are implemented is a couple simple reasons. One is just cost management. Things like I want to make sure that I'm avoiding redundant tests for my members, right? So some very simple ways to manage cost and utilization. Another one being that, hey, if I want to coordinate care for people with chronic conditions, it's a great way to make sure I can do that care coordination, having those authorizations of different services being done. And lastly, it's a way to properly manage some of the healthcare resources, meaning that a lot of drugs have some harmful side effects. And so there's a better way to actually see that data, prevent some adverse events based upon some of these side effects that drugs have, right? So being that that's why they're implemented, and we know we have a mandate coming up, well, why is the mandate coming? And I think the other side of it is some of the pain points we see in prior authorization. So if we look at some of this information, and I'll just preface it that a lot of this information comes from the AMA as well as CAQH. That information is linked in the notes if you want to check it out afterwards. But at the end of the day, about 72% of prior authorizations are submitted non-electronically, meaning that they're email, a fax, a phone call, a PDF being sent. So there's a lot of manual upkeep on the front end to actually even submit this information. Additionally, about 75% of clinicians surveyed cite prior authorization as either a high burden or a very high burden in the healthcare industry. So there's a lot of work to just submit these and work with these. And at the end of the day, about 80% of all prior authorizations are actually approved. So a lot of work on the front end, when at the end of the day, most of these authorizations are getting approved. However, if we look at across this whole ecosystem, prior authorization has been the third biggest challenge reported by clinicians. It's cited as 92% of clinicians cited this as care delays. And out of those care delays, 29% of them have resulted in hospitalizations. And if you look from 2022 to 2023, there was a 61% increase year over year in volume. And if you watch some of the health plans earning calls in 2024, a lot of the earning calls missed their numbers and they cited high utilization as the reason to that. So essentially, prior authorization, the volume is growing at an exponential rate. And just a side story as well, I was talking to one of my coworkers in December whose father was in for back surgery. And the day before the surgery, the hospital called and said they had to cancel his surgery. And they said, well, the authorization we submitted 7 weeks ago didn't get approved, so we're going to have to move it back to January and follow up with the health plan. Right. And so there's a system here that could be better and essentially benefit the patients, because anytime you have a situation where you're having a hospitalization due to care delays, that's not an ideal situation for the patient, provider, or the health plan. Right. So essentially, what does the CMS interoperability and prior auth rule state? I'll simplify it into the 2026 mandates and the 2027 mandates. But essentially in 2026, there's increased transparency that's going to include denial reasons with your response, right? So if you're getting denied for administrative reasons or medical necessity, that transparency has to be there in the response back to the patient. Additionally, there's aggregate reporting metrics that come out, like you have to report on the average turnaround times, the percent that get approved, the percent that are denied and then approved through an appeal, right? So this basic kind of reporting of how the program's running needs to be made widely available in many cases. And then finally, the decision timeframes are changing. So no longer do you have to wait 7 weeks for a prior authorization. The maximum wait time is going to be 7 days, and a provider can submit what is called an urgent request that needs to be turned around in 72 hours. So that summarizes the 2026 mandates that are required. In 2027, this is more about API access. So in 2027, we have a patient-facing API that allows you to see the status of your request. We have a provider-facing API to see all the services that are covered for that given patient. And then lastly, there's a payer-facing API. So if a member switches health plans to a different health plan, that previous payer would then have to provide up to 5 years of historical claims information so the new health plan can make better administrative decisions on that member's medical necessity decisions. So this is kind of the summarization of what that interoperability looks like. And if we look at how this is typically done in a health plan today, we have what I'd call the utilization management transactional system. So the day-to-day operations of implementing prior authorizations on the health plan is done with, one or many transactional systems. Sometimes these transactional systems are vendors that are implementing them. And often these transactional systems need to be able to interface with your other enterprise platforms like a membership, provider, claims, plan sponsor, right? So there is at the transactional level a back and forth that happens. In addition to that, many organizations today have this large analytical layer that consists of many different tools and technologies, everything from data warehouses to data lakes to somebody having Microsoft Access on their desktop. And all this leads to is layers of complexity, right? So I have all this transactional work happening. I have this analytical layer, and we think back to the slide of, hey, one of the challenges of having all these different tools is I don't have one place that I have unified data to move off of, right? And so I think this kind of speaks a little bit to that. We see this in many organizations today. If you would look behind the scenes of what that data really looks like, here's an example of the 3 types of prior authorizations across pharmacy, durable medical equipment, like a hospital bed, and surgical. And I would say that your data sets around this are typically in 2 different spheres. One is just your operating model data, which is what's shown here. Additionally, you have what I would call a clinical data repository, which might include things like somebody's medical claim history, and ultimately somebody's medical claim history might better inform of a future care plan, given that, if you can combine that information with your operating model, you can make better clinical decision support, right? So typically an organization from a data perspective, this is what your ecosystem looks like. And I want to talk a little bit about how Databricks specifically helps in this space, both in the 2026 and 2027 mandates. And specifically, I think data warehousing on the Databricks Lakehouse is best in class. This is a place where you can unify all your ETL, BI, and analytics to meet all the basic regulatory compliance, things like your average turnaround times. Very easy to do when you're able to combine that data and unify that data in one platform. You can do things like democratize data with AI for BI or Genie spaces. And that's where if I'm a clinician and I don't have any technical acumen, I can actually interact with my data, understand different parts of my data without having to know any sort of language, right? So how do I democratize data to a larger audience for the benefit of my patients and members, right? CMS also recommends things like provider gold carding. We'll see an example of what this looks like, but it's some very basic business intelligence rules and more of a rules engine base to say, how do I more efficiently manage my utilization management systems? Once you're able to kind of do that kind of base level, we see a lot of customers looking at things like advanced AI and ML. And one thing I'll call it specifically here is given the amount of manual lift happening in a lot of these exchanges, there's a lot of components where generative AI can play and actually reduce the administrative burden of these manual tasks. Additionally, there's ways to also automate decision-making, specifically approvals, to improve a patient's access to care. And why I say this is if you look at the breadth of authorizations that get submitted, some of these authorizations are very simplistic. Some of them are very complex. And so what we see organizations looking at is saying, we don't need clinicians to spend 5, 10, 15 hours on simple decisions. We want them to spend their time on these more complex decisions. So how do we start to help automate some of those easy decisions and actually improve patients' access to care? And so we'll walk through these over the next couple of slides just to kind of level set. But before we do that, wanted to just first kind of look at what a modern architecture would look like given the previous architecture, right? And this architecture would look something like this, where we have our transactional systems and our enterprise platforms like claims and membership, Databricks being that unified place to actually have all of that data available, right? So I can do everything from cleaning some of my data to get to the point where it's kind of a gold level aggregate to do some of the basic regulatory compliance. I can also automate some of those decision-making, and data that resides in a platform doesn't do anybody any good, right? It has to be in front of the people who need to see it at the time they need to see it. So there's this idea of being able to egress that data, whether it's for the regulatory compliance or for automated decision-making, back into the transactional system to make more informed decisions or better informed decisions, right? So this is what that new architecture would look like with Databricks data intelligence platform at the center of your analytics. So I would say if you look at kind of what it takes to accomplish that, one of the biggest challenges of actually getting to the point where you can move off of your data is being able to unify that data. So I would say a gold level aggregate data would look something like this, right? To say, here's my membership that's on the request, here's my provider ID, here's the date it was requested, here's the decision date, here's the status, was it appealed, right? So there's a lot of effort that goes in just to be able to centralize and normalize this data to this point. In the industry, we call that ETL or ELT, right? The ability to take all my data, do some of these big data transactions on it, and unify that data. And with Databricks, essentially, we started as that, open source Spark or open sourcing Spark. We've managed, or we kind of think of ourselves as a managed Spark platform for a lot of ETL workloads. And we give you the ability to run your ETL in R, Python, Java, Scala, or SQL. We're also being that we are an open unified platform, it's really easy for Databricks to integrate with different technologies. Like we have a lot of customers who will run Informatica on Databricks. So again, you can kind of bring the technology you need, but we're giving you best in class ETL processing, being that Spark is the de facto big data processing in the industry. Specifically, I want to talk about Spark SQL and serverless SQL. I think it's really important to call this out. And serverless SQL is the fastest growing product at Databricks. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. One is that one of the things that the data intelligence platform does for you is instead of having to manage things like partitions on a table, indexes on a table, part of what liquid clustering and predictive IO do is saying that instead of having an engineer or a platform engineer go in there and analyze and try to optimize your data structure, data intelligence platform will actually go in there and analyze the reads and writes that are happening on your data and automatically scale and repartition your tables and reindex your tables based upon those access patterns for optimal performance. The other thing I'd like to call out here specifically, and we'll see another example of this here on the next slide, but around AI functionality into SQL. And I mean that bidirectionally. So if I'm working in SQL, I can actually call an LLM and generative AI from SQL directly. And likewise, if I'm working where I don't know any technology, I can actually use an LLM to write SQL for me and actually get access to the data. And that's what we would call our Genie spaces. So what does that Genie space look like? And really, it's a way to bring business intelligence using AI to your staff to increase productivity. So here's an example of a claims table. What the data intelligence engine will do for you is in these comments here, these are all auto-generated comments based upon the column names, the table names, the way people access data. So the data intelligence engine will go through and tag your metadata for you. And so if I'm a clinician and I want to actually work with data in this table, I can, in natural language, ask a question like, when was the last prescription of, and this is a blood thinner, for a given patient? And so in natural language, I can start to interact with my data and democratize my data further to my staff. And we'll see an example of this in the demo. Additionally, there's a huge opportunity to reduce the manual efforts in this whole workflow. So we're going to look at a couple examples of what that looks like, and then we'll also see some of the information published by CAQH on why that's so important. But the one is just if we're looking at reducing some of the manual efforts on intake processing, here's an example where if we have PDF documents coming in that contain auth information, I can actually pretty easily use generative AI to map those PDF documents into something that looks a little bit more electronic. And that gives me the ability to actually streamline the entire workflow downstream based upon that intake, making it a very manual process previously and mapping it to a very electronic process that can go through and be more optimized from a workflow perspective. We also have situations where you have these ideas of benefits coverage. So here's an example of benefits coverage from 2018. Talks about all the services covered. This information is difficult to access from if I'm a user and I want to read this information. There's a lot to read through. Using LLMs and generative AI, you can actually start to parse this information out. So at the top, we have kind of all the Q&As that were, or all the Q&A information that was at the top of the document. At the bottom, we've actually inferred a lot of services and what those services mean. And so it's a way to say that if I'm somebody manually going in there and checking benefits coverage, this is a way to further democratize this information and organize this information into more of a structured view that's much easier to work with. Lastly, I'll call out some of the manual efforts around medical policies. So this is a hip replacement policy by one of the health plans. It's a 79-page document on medical literature. So if I have somebody who's coming in and requesting a hip replacement, what has to happen is this medical policy has to be applied to that request. So for somebody to sit through and read through 79 pages of medical literature is very difficult and arduous and tedious. And so the goal with generative AI and LLMs is to make my teams more productive. So rather than having to sit through that manually, I can use generative AI to say, hey, this patient, hey, they have rheumatoid arthritis, and I know that a hip replacement is covered with 12 weeks of non-surgical treatment documented, right? So again, I can use generative AI to parse this information for me without having to read through the whole thing. Additionally, I can say, well, given that this patient needs 12 weeks of non-surgical treatment, I can use generative AI and LLMs and Genie spaces to actually talk to my data and understand, does this patient have that 12 weeks of evidence? So a way to make your manual efforts much more efficient. And at the end of the day, why would you use Databricks for generative AI and LLMs? I think there's two important things to key on here. One is that with Databricks and Mosaic AI Gateway for LLMs, you can pick any model, right? So that's all of your models from OpenAI and Anthropic to your models that are open source like Llama, right, to different agent chains. And why this is important is that, if you look at how fast the healthcare industry is moving, you look at the acknowledgement of DeepSeek that was just released a couple of days ago, this is changing very quickly. So what you want to do as an organization is position yourselves where you can quickly switch in and out models based upon the best performing model. Specifically in healthcare, if you looked at Biomed, Metatron, Biomistral, Meekrat, these are all models that are healthcare specific that have come out within the range of 3 to 4 months next to each other, performing way better than the previous model. So it's really important to be able to align your organization to pick best-in-class models. The second reason that I would encourage you to think about using Databricks for your AI serving is around data governance, deployment, and coordination, right? And so what we saw in Databricks is a lot of our customers would do these amazing POCs on generative AI, but they didn't have the confidence to deploy this model to production because generative AI models have what we call a non-deterministic feature, meaning that if I ask the model the same question 2 different times, it's likely that model could give 2 different answers, right? So that concern of what we would call hallucination would defer organizations from actually submitting or deploying these to production. So if we think about our green model here in the middle, what we've done is a couple things to help organizations feel confident to move to production. One is just that we have what's called inference tables. So every input and every output to your model is audited and tracked in Databricks tables. So in real time, you can see what people are doing on the model, both from an input as well as the model responses. We also have what we would call guardrails that are fully customizable. So guardrails on the input. So if you are in Databricks and you want to call OpenAI, but you don't want OpenAI to have access to your PII and PHI, you can put a guardrail on the front that looks to detect any PHI in your request and either extract that information out or actually totally request that or reject that request from going to OpenAI itself. Likewise, on the backend and the model response, that backend, we have an ability to do guardrails to say, hey, if that model is going to recommend something like a care plan, we don't want models to recommend care plans. So have a check on the backend to make sure that there's no hallucination or it's not falling outside the guardrails in place. And so you have this confidence of a 99.9% with your model performance to now way above that, giving you that you have these guardrails and inference tables and full auditability across your whole ecosystem. Cool. Looking at a little bit of gold carding, and this is a very simple concept of given a provider's past behavior, let's go ahead and approve some of these requests based upon good quality or good behavior. And so for this example, we have 3 providers, NPI 111, 222, and 333. And if we look at, for example, that volume perspective that say a rolling 12 months for the NPI 111 is a 5,000 volume, their approval rate's 89%, which is really good. They're an in-network provider, but we're not going to gold card them because while 89% is really good, it might not be to the level that we really want to have for gold carding. Likewise for provider 222, they have 1,000 requests in the rolling 12 months. Their approval rating is 97%, so a very high approval rating. They're in network. And so anytime we would see a request from this provider, we're going to gold card them, meaning that we're not going to scrutinize what they're requesting. Given their great past performance, we're going to go ahead and approve everything they send and get that patient access to care quickly because that provider really knows what they're doing in the space and really has a good performance track record in our utilization system, right? Last provider here, 500 requests, a lower volume, 66% approval rate. Maybe they're in a tiered network and they're a second tier. We're not going to gold card them because either low volume or they're in a tiered network or because their approval ratings percentage or all of the above, right? So this is what gold carding essentially looks like. And what it does is it gives you the ability to reduce the administrative burden on your staff in a health plan. So, but this would result in a 15% reduction if we look at the volumes here in your total utilization volume, which is a really great program for gold carding. So that's more of a rules-based approach. I think additionally, beyond a rules-based approach, the great benefit of AI in a lot of these systems is what AI's bread and butter is to say, given a history of information or a history of utilization request, given that history, I can actually train and learn to know which situations are easy and likely to be approved, which situations are unlikely to be approved. So this is an example for a bed stay in an inpatient hospital. This is actually my family situation in October. I have a toddler. He came in with low oxygen levels, healthy oxygen levels above 95. If you're sick, it's usually between 90 and 95. His was 86 to 88, so very concerning from a observation of his oxygen levels. He was already on a nebulizer. He was already using antibiotics. He had a diagnosis of pneumonia 2 days ago. And so do we need a person to sit and actually sort through all this clinical information, knowing that this is going to be approved probably 100 times out of 100? That's the benefit of AI here, to say this is a really easy request. We don't need to burden our staff with looking at this and sorting through this. Let's go ahead and approve that stay, right? The other side of it is, if this is a little bit more complex, then what we do is we defer to our clinicians, right? Defer to our clinical staff to say, hey, this is a little too complex for me to make a decision on. And at that point, the clinician can say, yeah, this is an approved hospital stay, or here's an alternative care plan. Another alternative care plan could be something like, hey, instead of using this antibiotic, we could switch your antibiotics, right? So multiple different outcomes. So wanted to just kind of wrap up, talking about what all the things you can do with prior authorization on Databricks. Wanted to talk a little bit about the modernization impact in a couple different perspectives. One is just from CAQH. They published some good information on what's the opportunity. Just if I switch from manual authorizations to electronic prior authorizations, how much would be saved in the industry? And they broke it down by health plan and provider. And so in 2022, their total addressable market in the health plan payer and provider was about $450 million, right? So if we had just everything electronic, no gold carding, no automated decisions, we'd have a huge savings for electronic prior auth. They also broke that down by transaction. And so if you look at the eligibility and requirements checks and the prior authorization on the bottom, I highlighted in a red box the cost savings between those two. So per transaction, you're probably looking about $20 per request from 2022 that CAQH estimated, switching from the manual prior auth to the electronic prior auth. Beyond that, Databricks has their own business value team. And the goal of our business value team is to partner with our partners as well as our customers to help determine, hey, what's the value of some of these outcomes? So we did a whole business value assessment around modernizing prior auth and kind of the perspectives we said to say, hey, how do I make this workflow from manual to more automated and streamlined? So that's a key value driver. The other key value driver is from automated decision-making, from gold carding and some of the AI decision-making. And so if we look at these two and the results of them, so if we just made everything electronic from a health plan perspective, if you're a health plan with 1 million member lives covered, and you have about, there's some information out there from McKinsey that talks about there's about 2.5 prior authorizations per year per member. And so if we take these information as input, that's about a $1.6 million savings if I went from this manual prior auth to electronic prior auth and really optimize that workflow in between, right? So if you're a 10 million member health plan, that's a $16 million per year savings. And the savings here I'm talking about is specifically not about a staff elimination. This is talking about your utilization going up 61% year over year. That's something that we're recommending, that instead of trying to scale with people, you should start scaling with technology, right? And so when we think about the second value driver of gold carding and specifically around kind of the automated decision-making with AI, and again, we took the same inputs here. If you're a 1 million member health plan, average 2.5 requests per year, this is about a $17.8 million savings per year given that. So if you're a 10 million member health plan, this is about $178 million per year in total savings from this. And want to wrap up this with just kind of framing up a little bit about healthcare interoperability in the sense of we talked about the formats, but now kind of what do you actually want to get from this information, right? And what Databricks has is we have something called solution accelerators. These are open source packages that essentially help our customers go, instead of starting from ground zero, they start from ground 2 or ground 5, right? So it's a way to get to production faster. And so we build these and open source them, and many times we'll partner with our customers and partners to actually implement them in production in places. And so if I talk about specifically on interoperable data and what does it really truly mean to be interoperable in healthcare, I think there's a couple different components. One is just, is my data useful? And if it's useful, I think of that in terms of, is it available? Is it complete? And is it accurate, right? If it meets all three of those criteria, it's probably of some use to me, right? Next from there, I think about knowledge. Is this data enough that I can generate knowledge from it? And that's if it's consistent, if it's understandable, and relevant to the situation. And I think where healthcare really needs to get to, and where they're really trying to get to with a lot of these mandates, is can I take action off of interoperable data, right? Meaning that, is it timely for what I'm doing? And is it accessible by the right people? And with that being said, I'm really excited to introduce a team that's been spending a lot of time here on interoperability, especially going from useful data to actionable data with exponential data. So at this time, I want to pass it over to Adnan and Gaurav, and I'll stop sharing my screen here for you guys.
Thanks, Aaron. Very insightful. I think this reminds me of, I'm like one of the board members of our local health group. And while I'm sharing my screen, I'm just sharing this story too. As a part of their NCQA certification, they need to have like a patient advisory board. So as a part of that one of the key challenges that most of the clinicians brought at us was the same thing. It's like, hey, I wish like we have all the information about our patients and their insurances. So whenever they are either prescribing a procedure or they're prescribing, let's say, a medication, they already know they need to provide the evidence and other things that are needed for the prior auth. So rather than going back and forth, can we proactively do that? So when I think you were talking it through, I think there's like another motor asset I think came into my mind, so that we should talk about it. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be part of this discussion, and glad to be part of this phenomenal team with our partners Redox and Databricks. At a high level, what I'm going to go through is just briefly talk about, not to like steal the thunder from Adnan, more talking about how we have leveraged Redox as well as Databricks in transforming the FHIR definitions, the very different FHIR messages throughout the life cycle of the data as soon as it lands into the organizations, all the way it leaves the organization, and how it is managed within the organization as well. But at a high level, just to give you some little bit background about Exponential, we started with the mission where Exponential is a company that leads our client towards the AI innovation by painting a vision of like a future and the business capabilities. By doing that in the absence of practical outcomes is worthless. That's what we believe it. Like, so any action that we are planning to do it should bring in the value around that one. It has to be like a practical outcome for that. So we are both the guiding light that can help them innovate as well as help the clients execute to achieve the practical outcomes through their data. We do that by transforming hyper-complex environments and data into strategic assets, delivering solutions to business problems that results in business improvement that are market leading. And I think the most importantly, I think over here is the return on investment, which we always measure in the value. Value could be optimization, savings, revenues, turnaround time, things like that. So I think that's our key thing over here as a part of our mission. So at a high level, like who we are, like what's Exponential? So Exponential is like a data and AI consulting firm. We were founded by the team of leaders. Like most of us, like we have spent like entire career in the data analytics space, and also not in the data analytics space, but specializing in certain fields. Like myself, I'm in like a healthcare life sciences. Some of the leaders that come in is like from R&Ds, and some of them are like more into the industrialization as well. So it's like a breadth of like the domain knowledge that we have gained over the years and applied within like data and AI side of it. We are asked by our clients to help deliver their data and AI strategies to determine what AI capabilities they should build on, how those capabilities will actually manifest into the value of the business, and most importantly, like delivering the operating models around that, methods by which they can establish the trust and adoption. The reason I'm stressing on trust and adoption, those are the two key things, especially when it comes to AI. So there's always like an operating model, which is like a crawl, walk, run. Like we need to like start adopting in such a way so that at least the trust is established as well as the adoption is established. One thing which we always talk about it is like, hey, AI and some of the tools, some of the utilities that we are introducing is not to replace human. It is like more of a companion. So that's how I think we're going to look into it. So in a nutshell, it's like an AI flywheel that can continually produce meaningful outcomes for the business. And then drive into the architecture, the tooling aspects of it. And that's where we work very closely with like Databricks as well as with Redox, just to understand what is the right tooling, what is the right architecture, and not to overburden with too many tools and technologies, so that we can have like a world-class data platforms that can be leveraged to achieve those outcomes as well. So we started in June of 2023. So we are 2 years old, fastest growing mid-size data and AI firm. We will be close to 2,000 by the 200, sorry, team members by the, I wish we'll be 2,000 soon, 200 folks by the end of January. We have delivered like various successful projects, like 100 plus projects so far within like 18 months. All of these projects are like highly referenceable. About half of these things are led by the folks and the leaders in North America, which is because they are deemed as the experts within the industries they belong into, responsible for helping our clients towards developing their data and AI strategy. People really buy data services in the absence of this domain level expertise that we need to bring it in. Therefore, like these folks understands the processes, they understand the data, they understand the system, and that's how I think we rely on. The other half of the team right now, it's in a place called Kosovo. It's one of the like Baltic countries, fairly. We are like extremely proud. It's a very special place for us. One of the youngest country, English-speaking population, and the world-class AI talent that they bring it in. The feedback from the clients is unbelievable and got like an incredible outcomes that we have delivered using our Kosovo AI COE as well as like it's a key differentiator. In fact, some of the accelerators and assets that we are going to talk about it, a lot of that thing was incubated over here, but also developed in partnership with the team, the AI COE team, while working with Adnan on that one as well. So since we are partnered with Databricks, so marketing guys are smarter, so we came up with a term called mortar. So mortar is like bricks and mortar. So mortar is the various different assets and accelerators that we have built in collaboration with Databricks within healthcare as well as in life sciences. Like we have done assets like around the patient journey where it is identification of the patient, how we are going to do the monitoring as well as diagnosis of a patient, how the patient moves from one condition to another conditions that traverse, and how we are going to continue to remediate some of the conditions or the condition states that are needed. So like there is like an assets around that one, which is also built on Databricks for that one. There's a pharmacy of the future, hospital of the future. Most importantly, there are like a couple of other ones, which is very relevant to the prior authors. The basis of the prior is just to understand the value-based care along with the quality measures and the gaps in care around that one. All these things, the assets that we have listed over here, they are supported by the tools and the technologies and the processes around. And that's where like we have used most of the key tools and utilities that even Aaron talked about, like from the Unity catalog aspect of it, architecture engineering, AI, which is more of like a Gen AI side of thing, using even Ginny as well on that one too. So we'll during this session, we'll certainly get into the DB-Ignite FHIR interoperability, and that's where I'm going to go into the interoperability standards as well. I believe there is a poll right now. Adam, is that right? So the poll should be on for everyone.
Yep, we'll get that flashed up here shortly.
Okay, so while that poll is coming on, like, love to get your feedback on that one, just to see and measure how most of the attendees today they view as interoperability within their organization as well. As we all know, like since we are in this industry for a long time, the whole purpose of interoperability was to introduce standards, and we, as like the users of those interoperability, have like made those standards as unstandards. They are no more like a standards per se. Like 80% of the standards are there. We always bring a nuance to it. And that's where the things start going to change it. So there is so much of fragmentation of the data that these standards need to cope up with. I can tell you in last, like since I started looking into like from EDI to HL7s now to even FHIR, not only the standards have changed, even our conditions, as well as the way we approach those disease states have changed as well. There is like new sort of like therapeutics that are coming into the play. Like if you talk about like IO therapy, CAR T, and all those things, and that's where like some of the standards needs like nuances to it. So the challenges that we are having it over there, we start figuring out is like, hey, what is the best standard that we should start using it? Not only that, we also have the legacy standards as well. We still have to deal with CCDAs. We still have to deal with HL7 messages. Most of our systems, they talk like from HL7 messages to when it's coming from provider to the plan side or vice versa. Like, so those are the things that we need to talk about. And even Aaron touched based on those things. It's like, hey, we have 4 or 5 different standards and we can do it. And honestly, I think looking at the results right now, like 37% said HL7, FHIR is close to 38, EDI is 13, and others is 12. Like, so like if you look into the legacy ones, almost 50% of them are still, we are living in the legacy world. So there is like a challenge out there. It's like, hey, if I'm getting an information in HL7 message, do I have to build something like connectivity and interoperability only for HL7? Do I have to do only for FHIR? Do I have to do only for EDI? On top of that, like every partner that we're going to deal with will have their version of those standards as well. And that was the whole stab that DaVinci. So DaVinci was like a program that started, I believe, in 2012, 2013. I had an opportunity to work as like through one of the founding member of that organizations. I was representing one of the firm, which was also the founding member of DaVinci. And the whole idea of the DaVinci was it's like, hey, how we can standardize some of the very specific use cases when we are exchanging the data. So we utilize this FHIR as the core, and then say, hey, if we are doing, let's say, for risk adjustment, how the FHIR should be extended, that all the risk adjustment attributes are going to be there. It worked very well, honestly, for a few years, or maybe for very specific use cases. But again, as I said, like there are nuances to certain condition states. There are some nuances and some additional information is needed. And that's where DaVinci is also coming into more around. It's like, hey, there is always a room to expand. We cannot accommodate everything. So let's go ahead, make sure at least 80 or 90% of those specific use case attributes are accounted. Rest we'll leave it to the partners when they're dealing with on their interoperability as well on that part. So when we were going through this, the DaVinci one, we also used like a framework, and I'm like a big fan of like Michael Porter, who has like tried to redefine healthcare for a very long time, over 2 decades now. What we started to look into was it's like, hey, so the challenge is on the operability, how the data is, but for what purpose that we need to do it. So that's where we start looking into like what we call it as the patient and the provider value drivers. So you have to start looking into like what are the core activities that happen during the course of any healthcare transition that is happening over there, like which is more about like monitoring, preventing any conditions or a disease, diagnosing it, providing interventions, what kind of like activities that needs to be performed. When you are going through the diagnosis and the interventions, how are you managing that condition state or recovering it? And then all those various aspects of it, what is the like the whole delivery and the financial administration that needs to be accounted? So based on that, like there's like a series of use cases, series of like very specific things that we have done, and a couple of them we have mentioned over here in the slides too. But when we talked about like again the prior auth part of it, and then the example that I think which just came to my mind is which is like, hey, can we help like our providers to have enough information? It's like, hey, start providing this information so there's a quick turnaround for the prior auths. Was certainly around the like reduce the gaps in care, like. And when we talk about the quality measures, I remember like there was like one of the health plan we did it like within the first year, their quality score was increased from 3.5 to 4, and in the subsequent year from 4 to 4.5. So within 2 years, they raised their quality score from 3.5 to 4.5. Most importantly, like now they had more information now. Earlier, in order to get to those quality scores, they used to struggle with like so much of manual work in getting all the data sets that are needed. And not only the data sets, whether it was complete, consistent, all the things that even Aaron touched about in his closing remarks as well. So these are some of the things as a part of like the motor part that we talked about. We have executed these use cases. They are working on the prior auth as well. But the goal is to get into like how this thing comes into action. So with that said, I'm going to transition over to Adnan fairly quickly on how we have been using the DB Ignite piece in the real world. Adnan?
Thank you, Gaurav. So first we wanted to talk about FHIR as the primary interoperability standard for healthcare data exchange, and how having a robust interoperability framework to read and write FHIR is crucial now more than ever with the upcoming CMS prior auth requirements. So healthcare data makes up 30% of the world's total data, with every small interaction and result being small pieces of this bigger picture. FHIR acts as a liaison to allow our providers and healthcare organizations to see this bigger picture and get closer to having a patient 360, which will result in improved care and more efficient provider-payer interactions. However, FHIR doesn't come without its challenges, as we'll see on the next slide. Gaurav, if we can switch the slide.
Yeah, sorry, it was taking a lag. I think there was a lag.
No worries. So at times, FHIR can be a bit of an oxymoron. It's a standard that isn't standardized across all organizations. It's extensible, but not extensible enough to derive value from every domain. Many modern FHIR and interoperability frameworks are resource demanding and lack proper data governance and lineage due to the tools and architecture utilized to develop them. Here shortly, we'll see how 2 Databricks solutions accelerators help to solve these problems. However, before we continue, I wanted to touch quickly on how FHIR comes into play with data modeling. We've seen several organizations want to recreate a one-to-one mapping between FHIR resources and their own personal data model. Unfortunately, FHIR resources aren't comprehensive. Take the example of patient experience data in this diagram. So we see that we'll utilize several different FHIR resources, but this data is not enough to derive meaningful patient experience value from them. So if you really want to be able to leverage your FHIR resources, you're going to have to model your data in a way to keep your end result and use case value in mind. And that's the way that you'll truly be able to drive changes and create value. And if we move forward, we'll start to look at the Databricks solutions accelerators. So Databricks has been working to make interoperability and the development of interoperability frameworks easy and user-friendly on their platform. So 2 Databricks solutions accelerators, which we at Exponential helped to co-develop with Databricks over the past year, include DB-Ignite, which allows reading and writing of FHIR resources. Second, we have the Databricks FHIR API service, which will further equip your organization for your interoperability framework and needs, as well as all data exchange needs. And here on the next slide, we'll look at some of the key features of DB-Ignite. The 2 big ones I want to highlight here are the bidirectional nature of DB-Ignite and the low-code aspect of it. So DB-Ignite offers an out-of-the-box solution. It's ready to use directly from the repo for you to read and write all 161 FHIR resources. Additionally, all coding is minimal and it's in familiar languages like Spark SQL. This differentiates DB-Ignite from other FHIR converters that are out there. We have also been working to take this low code to the next level by leveraging the resource metadata and descriptions of the different fields in the resources with a GenAI model, which will automatically map between your custom schemas and your FHIR resources. So it'll take that low code to no code. And on this next slide, we'll be able to see DB-Ignite in action. But before we continue, I think we have a poll on this slide. As that comes up and answers come in, I'll continue to go through this slide and we'll discuss the poll at the end of it. So here we get an idea of how DB-Ignite can be utilized. First, you're able to manually map between FHIR resources and your custom schemas with our pre-built templates. So it's really easy, just plug in field to field and go from there. Additionally, you can directly query on those FHIR resources and bundles, and soon you'll be able to leverage the GenAI model to map between your FHIR resources and your custom schemas directly. So let's take the example of writing different claims resources, which will be crucial for the upcoming CMS requirements. Without DB-Ignite, this takes tons of time, a lot of resources, and requires a lot of manual effort. However, when you take advantage of DB-Ignite and its out-of-the-box solution, it's a quick, efficient process, and you'll even be able to take several years of claims history and write it into FHIR resource format in a matter of minutes. I never saw that poll come up, Adam.
We'll get it flashed up here shortly.
I got you. All right. So what I'm really interested in seeing with this poll is kind of where everyone's at in their FHIR utilization and capabilities. So looking forward to seeing what the quorum says.
And Adnan, while we are waiting for the poll results, one thing which I would like to encourage every attendees over there, if you have FHIR about to start working with the FHIR resources or already like organization has adopted, I would highly recommend looking into DB Ignite. As Aaron mentioned it's an open source. Majority of these features are there, and it is like active. It's a project that we are actively working on as a team. So there are like a lot of great roadmap features that we have identified, and we would love to hear the thoughts from the users on what are the features that we should be looking into incorporating that.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. All right. Looks like we are a little bit behind on our FHIR capabilities and utilization in this group. So the big thing I really want you to take away from this is we have several organizations here, Databricks, us at Exponential, and Redox, that are ready to further enhance your capabilities, FHIR capabilities, and meet your different healthcare data needs, whether it's deriving value or driving changes in your organization. And we can leverage DB Ignite, we can leverage the Databricks FHIR service to do this. And yeah, we're here to help you. So on this next slide, I want to pivot back to the Databricks FHIR API service and take the use case of CDS hooks in enterprise applications, which highlight the importance of this solutions accelerator. Just about every single enterprise application leverage API communications with FHIR service. So having a high performing FHIR API service will be critical in meeting the interoperability and healthcare data exchange needs of your organization. The Databricks FHIR service democratizes your data, allows you to have the tools needed to properly interact with CDS services, enterprise applications like Smart on FHIR. Additionally, these CDS services oftentimes integrate with payer systems and provide real-time information on coverage in addition to their clinical decision support, which allows you to eliminate the limbo period between payer decisions and the provider providing good care, quality care. Shortly, we'll hear from Redox and how they can help to facilitate these CDS hooks. However, the implementation of Databricks Solutions Accelerators like DB Ignite and the Databricks FHIR API service will prove to be foundational in supporting your organization's interoperability needs. And if we move forward to the next slide, we'll be able to see how DB Ignite and Redox can work together. So here we see the architecture with reads into your bronze layer and writes back to Redox or whatever other organization you want to write FHIR resources back into. Later on in the demo, we'll be able to see this workflow in action with data coming from Redox into Databricks and those reads and writes of FHIR. I really wanted to highlight the bidirectional nature of this, so you're able to read that FHIR and write back FHIR resources from your custom schemas, no matter what the format is. Additionally, you can further enrich your data, which is important to drive value and changes within your organization after you bring that data into your Databricks environment, whether it's building AI models, consuming systems on top of it. Yeah, so now I'll pass it on to Tim at Redox to further discuss their capabilities and how they come into play.
Thanks, Anand. And we'll give it one moment. Gail will be presenting and sharing from our screen. So perfect. Hey, everyone, great to meet you. My name is Tim Kessler. I'm the field CTO at Redox, and I'm responsible for overseeing all of our cloud partnerships. Have worked at Redox for coming up on 9 years. And before joining Redox, I actually used to do implementations back at Epic. So I've been working in the EHR and healthcare data integration space for quite a while now. I'll pass it to Gail to let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Gail Hamilton. I'm a senior product manager here at Redox, and I oversee networks and FHIR APIs.
Perfect. Next slide. Great. So I mentioned I've been with Redox for the last 9 years now, but Redox has been around for about 12 years. And we actually started in Madison, Wisconsin, where if you're familiar with the EHR and the healthcare data space, you might be familiar with another company based there. That's because quite a few of the early Redoxers were former Epic employees like myself, where we got to see firsthand the difficulty for third parties to integrate into a healthcare organization's EHR system and some of the struggles that these organizations would run into as they're trying to open up new opportunities within the healthcare data space, as they're trying to really make healthcare data useful. So after leaving Epic, we really formed Redox as a way to remove integration as a barrier to entry to advancing the healthcare ecosystem. Since then, we've grown considerably. We're now over 150 employees. Everyone's based in the US. We're transacting over 1.3 billion healthcare data transactions per month to over 375 different customers across 95 plus different EHR ecosystems. And our core focus at Redox is first and foremost to make healthcare data useful. And the way we go about doing that is offering a single point of connectivity where you can use the Redox API, either our core JSON-based data models or our fully featured FHIR API, to integrate with any healthcare system, any EHR system, any payer system, clearinghouse, as well as systems like Databricks and other cloud solution platforms. So when you work with Redox, you integrate once with Redox and can reuse that connection to both send and receive data in any format from any healthcare data system. Redox will handle the translations of that legacy format into the desired format that you're looking to consume. So think examples like taking HL7 streamed outbound in real time from the EHR. Redox will translate that into a FHIR execute bundle and can post that directly into Databricks. So actually, Gail, jump to that next slide.
Sorry for that.
And so the way we really think about the entire healthcare data interoperability lifecycle is really in 5 steps. So first and foremost, there's that initial connectivity. So standing up an integration to a source system like Epic, Cerner, athenahealth, Allscripts, Meditech, McKesson. We can keep on going down the list for another 80, but it dries up pretty quickly with names that you've likely never heard of and hopefully don't have to come across too often. But Redox exists to really handle and remove the complexity that those different systems introduce and handle the translation and normalization of that data into a consistent format, most often, say a FHIR execute bundle that can be written directly into Databricks, and then where DB-Ignite can be deployed to make sense and structure that data into the desired schema within that ecosystem. So after that initial connectivity is in place, Redox will handle the translation of that legacy data format into the desired format that you're looking to consume. In addition to that, we'll also handle the normalization of that data. And just to kind of describe a brief difference between translation and normalization, we look at translation as saying taking, an XML-based CCD that could be a file anywhere 10 to 20 to even 30 megabytes in size, and translating that into, a FHIR execute bundle of anywhere from 30 to 40 FHIR resources. We consider that translation. Same go with HL7 or X12 into that FHIR format. What we think about when we look at normalization is really, how do we make sense of these different values that are referring to the same thing from every single source system we're connected to? So let's say hypothetically you're connected to 3 different organizations that are all running Epic. Epic Site 1 might send out a patient sex value that is, male or female. Epic Site 2 might send out a patient sex value that's, an alphanumeric code corresponding to male or female. Epic Site number 3 might send just a single numerical digit that references a category list value. When Redox looks at normalization, what we're referring to is taking all of those unique values, applying a translation set so that regardless of which system that data is coming from, you're going to receive a consistent patient sex value, even if the raw source data was unique and different. Then directly within Redox, we've got self-service functionality to allow you to maintain these various different translation sets, adjust or modify the configuration, and that can all be applied at either the source and destination. So you could have a situation in place where you want to apply a configuration between Redox and Databricks, to route that data into Databricks in a very specific format or with a custom FHIR implementation guide that you're leveraging. And then you could also potentially have, a database where you're consisting or persisting the raw source data that's coming out of that EHR, that source system. We see this quite commonly in scenarios where, an organization might want to do deep analytics on that data in their Databricks environment, but maybe they have to persist that raw source system data for audits later on. Redox can handle consuming that feed, splitting that feed into 2 separate destinations, applying a configuration, translation sets, and normalization functions on both sides of that connection to really provide the ultimate amount of flexibility possible with what you're looking to deploy. Again, our core focus is to make healthcare data useful, and we want to make sure that the data coming into Redox is leaving Redox and deposited into your destination environment as ready to use as possible. Which kind of leads us into our next area, which is what we refer to as data enrichment. Data enrichment is really taking that normalization to the next level. So for example, how can we look at something, say, one system is sending clinical data. Hopefully this isn't occurring anymore, but maybe one system sending data with an ICD-9 code and another system sending data with an ICD-10 code. Now, Redox doesn't have any clinicians on staff who can make clinical decisions about how best to translate this data. Rather, our focus is, how can we give our partners and customers the tooling necessary to apply the enrichment they want to see to that data, while also augmenting that data with trusted partners that can help further enrich it. In scenarios like this, where one system sending one code set and another system sending another code set, Redox partners directly with one of our partners called IMO, or Intelligent Medical Objects, where we can query out, hit an external API endpoint, pull in an enriched code set value into that payload. So while persisting the original source data code set, we can also include or inject an enriched code set into that payload so that when that data hits your destination endpoint, you not only have the raw source data that was initially sent, but you also have an enriched code set that normalizes the value to the formats you want to work with. And lastly, we have the use and deploy section. Now, this is really an area where Redox likes to wipe our hands clean. We'll never log into your downstream tenant or your Databricks environment and build on top of it within that ecosystem. But that's why we partner with groups like Databricks and Exponential. Exponential has a high amount of expertise within the Databricks ecosystem. So Redox likes to focus on, how do we get this data into your environment in a clean format that's ready to use, and then we pass it off to partners like Exponential, who can really help you build out that Databricks environment to meet the needs of your organization. Next slide, Gail. So when we think about our partnership with Databricks and what we're hoping to achieve here, our focus is really, how can we stand up connectivity to these downstream source systems, handle that translation and normalization, and get that data into your Databricks environment as quickly as possible. We've seen too many scenarios where it takes organizations 6 to 9 to 18 months to stand up a healthcare data integration. And it blows our mind because this is all we do. We've done this for over a decade. And we're very, very good at it, to the point where we're never starting an integration from zero. When we kick off an integration, we're basically 90% of the way complete. We already have the configurations from our configuration library of over 30,000 unique configurations. We've integrated with over 95 different EHR systems, which means we've seen just about every flavor of healthcare data and every format. Every style of authentication method that a healthcare organization or an EHR vendor could require. And what that enables us to do is it allows us to go from project kickoff to production level go live in about 4 to 6 weeks. We can honestly move quite a bit quicker than that. We've even done integrations in as quickly as 24 hours, but we recognize how many stakeholders are involved in a healthcare data integration. And I don't necessarily want to get your hopes up that every integration is going to be that quick. But if you own the data in your source system and you're looking to get that data out of there into Databricks in a quick timeline, Redox is the best solution for that. And Gail, if you can jump to the next slide, I'll expand on that a bit. Now, I've talked quite a bit so far about how Redox can ingest data from many different source systems, handle a variety of different data formats, everywhere from FHIR to HL7 to XML-based CCDs, X12 data. We can handle all of this, handle the translation and normalization of that into a consistent FHIR data format, and post that directly into Databricks. I also mentioned that a typical implementation for Redox is about 4 to 6 weeks from project kickoff to production level go live. But I do want to call out that you'll see here, we list 4 to 8 weeks from project kickoff to production level go live. That additional 2 weeks comes into play when we're doing a bidirectional integration. So not just pulling data out of an EHR or source system, but then converting, FHIR or a post to Redox back into HL7 or XML-based CDAs, or FHIR to post back into an EHR. Anytime we're writing data back into a source system, there's going to be an expanded testing timeline. So we generally add about 2 weeks to the implementation for that. And what I mean when I say writing back, this is all in real time. We're not just dropping a flat file to an SFTP to be picked up and loaded in at convenience, although we can support that. When I say real time, we're streaming this data through Redox, translating into the desired format to push that back inbound into the clinician's EHR at their fingertips in real time. So end-to-end processing of that data through Redox is generally sub 50 milliseconds. So you can have a situation where a provider places an order that flows outbound from the EHR and HL7. Redox translates that to FHIR, posts that into Databricks. You could perform a function on that, write back a result or response to that, post that to Redox, and we'll streamline that back into the EHR in HL7, and that end-to-end flow can all happen in under a second. So there's quite a bit of functionality that we're deploying here to make this possible. But we have a massive suite of over 9,000 live integrations across 95 different EHRs with over 375 different customers that are leveraging this functionality and seeing that real-time integration experience up front and center. I also want to call out that, Redox, for the most part, will almost always interact with FHIR data between Redox and Databricks. That's our core focus. We're certainly very focused on seeing FHIR adoption spread throughout the healthcare ecosystem. What we've seen in reality, unfortunately, is that it's going to take a bit of time for FHIR to become fully widespread. And this is where we really see the value of leveraging support for those legacy formats like HL7, like CDA, like XML or X12. Unfortunately, we're likely going to continue to see these in use by healthcare organizations, payers, providers, other entities within the ecosystem. Heck, I mean, even right now, I'm working on a project that involves consuming fax data and translating that into a FHIR format in order to actually allow an organization to make sense of this. So as much as I would like to say that, within the next year, HL7, XML, CCDs, and faxes will disappear from healthcare, I'm optimistic, but I'm not that optimistic. So one of the core values that we really look to push forward here is, how can we put that data into a consistent format so that you don't necessarily need to have the expertise to deal with all these unique legacy solutions? Work with Redox and we'll handle that translation directly. Now, I talked a bit about the real-time nature. I talked a bit about the ability for Redox to transact within a provider's workflow or a payer's workflow so that they don't necessarily have to jump out into an external system, but they can sit within their EHR for the entirety of the flow. But I want to pass off to Gail next, who's going to be digging into quite a bit of details around that real-time nature and how we think about that with regards to prior authorization and some of the Da Vinci workflows that we're seeing come into market. So with that, thanks everyone. I'll hand off to Gail.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for a great overview of Redox. So I'm kind of going to make this a little bit quicker. We've seen this before, and Aaron gave a really great overview of the whole prior authorization flow. So what I want to do is kind of make this real. How does Redox with Databricks enable an automated prior authorization flow to allow you to have that automation that enables efficiency gains of like 60 to 70%. So the first thing is, I'll build out the slide. So the first thing is Redox initiates, you have the data coming from an EHR. So you have a patient visiting a provider. Maybe it's a person that's been running a lot and they have some knee problems, and there's an image that indicates that there's some surgery needed. So all that information is at the EHR. So the EHR will then send that information to Redox. Now, Redox deals with, as you remember from what Tim mentioned, the connectivity. There's so many ways to connect. There's X12 using SOAP. There's FHIR. There's FHIR Smart on FHIR. There's FHIR with CDS hooks. There's HL7 where you need a VPN. All these connection options, Redox takes care of them, so you don't have to deal with them. So that's our partner Databricks has this, doesn't have to deal with all these variability of connections. So the data now, we're connected, but it's still at Redox. And they need to send it to the pair. So then we send it, the pair now might be dealing with X12, or maybe it's been sent as X12 from the pair system, from the provider system, and it needs to be translated into FHIR. Redox, as we heard, can take care of that translation, can take care of that normalization, can take care of those value sets and code sets, so that data is consumable by the pair system and uses the right terms and uses the right value sets that the pair system is expecting. So now it's sent to the pair system, and at this point, Databricks is in the format that is readily consumable, and Databricks can take that information and apply all their AI and their generative AI, so that if you have documentation requirements, maybe in that PDF document for that knee surgery, and you need that 12 weeks of physical therapy, that can be extracted, and the system can now take the clinical information that's been sent directly from the provider and marry it up against the documentation requirements and determine one of three things. Is a prior authorization required in this case? And if a prior authorization is required, is it met with the current data that's been sent directly from the provider system? And then if a prior authorization is needed and there's extra documentation, what is that data gap that needs to be filled? So that whole process happens in these pink bubbles here with the pink. And then you have that decision. And as mentioned, that decision needs to be actionable, needs to be sent back to the provider system. So Redox takes care of the round trip backwards. So now we're taking the data, maybe we're taking it from FHIR and sending it back as an X12 format, and we're making that connection to SOAP. And all of this, again, happens seamlessly without having to, Databricks having to worry about all these connections and formatting. So that enables that end-to-end process to happen. So the end result is you have a provider sitting while the patient is in the room as part of the encounter, and they can actually hear, yes, your prior authorization has been approved, and here's some additional things that need to happen, or here's no prior authorizations need, you're good to go. We can continue with your care journey. So it's the whole process can be automated so that that patient can walk away from their encounter with a care decision. So this just highlights the connection piece. So this is the first step. As I've mentioned, we take care of handling all the connections, whether it's CDS hooks, whether it's Auth on using Smart on FHIR, whether it's HL7 requiring a VPN, X12 over SOAP, all these different variabilities of connections Redox can handle. Then all this information is automatic. If we're talking about CDS hooks call, this information would be pulled in a FHIR format from the EHR and sent to the payer system, normalized so the payer system can consume it, and then sent to Databricks so that they can do that medical decision. So here we're showing this, the provider submitting the prior authorization information. Again, could be sending it through multiple mechanisms. But if Redox accepts that, when Redox takes that information, it can be in FHIR, it could be in X12, it could be in HL7 version 2. We do that transformation and send it to the payer system. And the last piece is, well, this is where Databricks would use its generative AI to take the documentation requirements and marry it up against the clinical information that has already been provided. and are able to render that decision quickly. So this is the last piece where it's really showing the data coming back within the provider workflow. So that the provider can, while the patient is in front of them, they can give them a real-time decision on what is the next steps for them. Has the prior authorization, is it been required? If it's required, has it been approved with the current clinical information in the patient's clinical record? Or is there additional data that needs to be supplemented? And it's possible in the future, as we build out, especially on these Da Vinci flows, being able to gather that additional information through maybe a smart on FHIR app or a FHIR form questionnaire. And so that the provider can ask those questions and gather that additional information while the patient is there in front of them. So that enables that whole process that today we heard takes weeks, can happen in real time within the patient encounter. So I think we have a quick survey here. So a couple of questions. Want to find out, are you familiar with TEFCA? Because I'm going to switch a little bit to talk about networks. And are you planning to use TEFCA in 2025? So give a couple of seconds for that. I know we don't have a lot of time, but okay, I think we can probably just close that out and get the results. Okay, so yes, I expected that we would not have a lot of people familiar with TEFCA, and we see that not many people are planning to use TEFCA in 2025. So this slide is really to explain what is TEFCA. So TEFCA really fundamentally is a common trusted and legal framework with governance on top to enable for data exchanges to happen without requiring a BAA to be in place, so that you can request clinical data across the network from any provider and get that information without necessarily having to have that one-to-one agreement signed, which obviously, having that paperwork in place takes a lot of time and effort. So one of the key ideas of these networks, not just TEFCA, is the idea that you must identify for why you need this data. And that's given a term called purpose of use. Purpose of use is generally, this is the reason I want to exchange data or receive data about my patient. For most of in networks today, it's clinician to clinician exchanges for the purpose of use of treatment. For payers, the payers to request clinical data, they would be looking for a purpose of use called operations. Today in TEFCA, operations is not required. That means if you joined TEFCA and you made a request and you had a patient in front of you and you want to get more information, maybe to identify, is this prior authorization? What additional information can I have to understand if this is a prior authorization that can be approved? Then you wouldn't get a response from the provider today. That's changing in coming about February 2026, according to the current timelines. Operations will be required for providers. So if providers are on TEFCA and they are participating in operations, they need to respond to the operations purpose of use. So that means if you make a request on TEFCA, the provider must respond with that data. But that's coming probably is about a year from now. The data itself under TEFCA kind of flows into one flavor right now, which is the CCDA or CDA. And that's just the document. As it's been explained by many of the panelists, Aaron did a great job explaining all the different data formats. CDA is a document, and that's most of the exchanges that are happening today. But FHIR is coming as well, so that's going to be required in the end of this year. So we're moving towards not only having document exchange and FHIR exchange, and Redox can help on this network, because if you're getting a data and you have it in a CDA and you want to be able to ingest it, maybe send it to your analytics engines, for HEDIS measures, then we can do that transformation directly from the CDA into FHIR without you having to worry about how do I manage CDA documents, how do I extract data from CDA documents and turn them into FHIR data. And we are planning to join TEFCA and on board to a qualified health information network. There's the QHINs, as they're pronounced. These are the major organizations that manage the whole network. There's 8 of them currently, and we will be onboarding to multiple QHINs and HINs, health information networks like Care Quality. We already provide connectivity to Care Quality today. So you can see that this is a way to get a lot more information from across the network without having to build out those individual BA agreements with between you and the providers and payers. Okay. And so what's next for Redox? So we have the point-to-point integrations, as Tim did a great job mentioning. We support X12 to FHIR, FHIR to X12. We also support FHIR to CDA and bidirectional. So we do transformations between those for networks. What's coming next is, as you saw mentioned, CDS hooks. CDS hooks really is a mechanism to allow for this decision to be sent and then returned and displayed within the EHR, within the workflow of the provider. So they don't have to log into another system, it just all happens within the EHR. So it's all very streamlined. And we're also will be on-ramping to TEFCA fairly soon. So be able to provide access to these trusted networks. And then later on, we'll be looking at enhancing support for prior authorizations around if you're familiar with Da Vinci flows, the CRDs, to enable the gathering of that additional information. So just want to hand this off now, and Mike's going to give us a demo.
Great, thanks everybody. Matt Julia here from Databricks. And I'm really excited to finally show, kind of all this in action. So, hopefully you can see my screen, and, the Redox direct integration with Databricks is really exciting to me because it just works, and you're going to see it, live here in just a few minutes. So just to kind of talk about a little bit what's going to happen, we're going to send some files directly from Redox to Databricks in a Unity catalog volume. We'll then read those in using autoloader into some bronze tables using variant. And then using dbignite, we'll actually parse those immediately into some silver tables. And then that'll power an AI BI dashboard where we'll get some insights. And then we've heard a lot about, prior auth and other types of things. And of course, that's a mandate coming. We're going to need to do that really efficiently. So we'll do some exploratory analysis on an actual prior auth FHIR JSON that we've received. And then, we'll send it to our utilization management team with some enriched data. And we'll actually write that back with dbignite into a FHIR bundle and post that straight back to Redox, and so that they can send it to an EMR. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and log into Redox. So I've got a Redox account right here, and I'm going to try to make this full screen if I can. Not sure if I'm able to, so I'm just going to skip that. Okay, and I've logged into Redox, and what I've done is I've actually created a destination here specific for our demo today. And okay. Oh, I'm in production. Of course, we're going to use development today. And so here's my destinations, and I've got a destination right here called the HLS webinar FY25 Q4. And let's send some test data to that. Okay, so here's my destination. And Redox, of course, one of the beautiful things about it is that it'll take things like ADTs or CCDAs and turn it immediately into a well-formed FHIR JSON bundle for you. So you can just stream in all of your FHIR data, no matter what the source is, really easily. So we're going to go ahead and use some ADTs today because I think those are really exciting. And I'm just going to click send. And we can see that it's successfully sent to our destination. Come over here to the logs, and we can see some of these are pending. And that's totally fine. And let's go ahead and hit refresh on here. And we can actually see that these are now actually being sent directly to our destination. So this destination is actually a volume in Unity Catalog. So it's fully managed by Unity Catalog. And what I've done is I've actually created a pipeline, not unlike one of the ones that Exponential would build for you. and that we would partner with you where it's actually streaming in now with a file arrival trigger immediately into our bronze and silver table. So there's no waiting here. The files are already immediately available in Unity catalog volumes, and now they're immediately streaming into our bronze table. We'll come back to this workflow in a few minutes, and we'll actually see that it's parsed completely into silver tables. So what we're doing, really, is we're actually parsing all of those FHIR resources into silver tables, which you can then do analytics on. You can send it to your care management teams that they can then manage those members, send them to your machine learning models for predictive modeling risk scores, like on readmission or things like that. And of course, you can also use it for things like for the prior auth returns. So I just want to show you one of these tables in Unity Catalog right here. This is a fully streaming table that's been actually defined using 100% SQL. So, you can use SQL in Databricks. It's a great tool for ETL. SQL is now becoming one of my favorite languages, honestly, to use inside Databricks. And this is a fully streaming table here where you can see that. You can see the column properties here. And all of these tables that you see here are being actually loaded right now by that workflow that you just saw us kick off. And for every new resource that you might receive from somebody like Redox, these workflows will automatically add those additional silver tables for you. Okay, so having tables is great, but you want to be able to make sense of that data, right? So one of the things that we offer in Databricks is something called AI/BI dashboards, and I've put this one together here for us. And this is actually reading directly from the silver tables that you just saw. And we can see things like, information about the bundles coming in. So far we've got 345. That'll increase, of course, once this workflow is done. We can see things like patient details. We can hover over some of these graphs that you see here, really quickly make these types of things. We'll actually see how to make these in a few seconds. And we can go full screen even and, make a map, of course, or exit full screen. We can review things like the encounters. This is the different encounter classes, the distribution of the duration in minutes for the actual event and the encounter. And we can also do some claims analysis, right? So, maybe I want to look at average total claim amount for some of these different procedures that might be, or primary procedures or services that might be going on. I can immediately just click on something like professional, and that'll automatically filter other things in here. And I can see really easily that, no surprise for anyone on this call, hospital admissions are, one of the #1 things that for average cost. So, what about prior auth, right? So, you might have noticed up here, I've got a filter for claim. And if I click on this, I can see that I've got uses for my claim resources of claim and pre-auth. And I can select just pre-auth. And it turns out I've got one bundle that is a pre-auth use. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if we can make some sense of that. So let's do some exploratory analysis. I've switched over to a SQL notebook running against a serverless SQL warehouse. And what I've done here is I'm going to go ahead and use my catalog. And one of the cool things about being able to do exploratory analysis right here in the notebook is that, even with something like Bronze, if you're a data architect or a data engineer, you can immediately get some insights directly from even your Bronze data. So I've actually loaded this in using our variant data type, which is a preview data type in Delta. And we're actually able to now see immediately how to parse this JSON, these FHIR JSONs, without actually using any JSON schemas, which is actually really exciting. What that means is that you can write SQL directly against all of these objects immediately. So if you're a data architect or a data analyst that is an advanced analyst that maybe has to make sense of some of the data, this can be really helpful. So using variant, we can even get right down to latitude and longitude in SQL just from your Bronze table as soon as it comes in. So for example, I've run this SQL right here as well. The notebook shows both. And you can see that I've got patient ID, latitude and longitude completely parsed out of there without having to do any additional effort if I needed to. We can also create visualizations. So I just click on the button there. I can select any of my favorites, but I want to make a map. Everyone loves maps, and it's super easy to just go ahead and select your latitude and longitude. I can even create a grouping column for some color. Go ahead and click off, hit save. Yep, whoops. User error there. Latitude and longitude. I see it's because this is in the way. There we go. Save and whoops. Edit. And map. right, sorry about that. Save, and there's a map, right? So for any of you that have ever used Leaflet or had to code those over the years with me, that took a lot longer than normal, but usually it's just a couple of seconds. So let's go ahead and evaluate this prior auth. So what I've done here is I've actually created a Databricks widget. And using SQL, we can actually declare variables directly in Databricks SQL here. So I'm just declaring a variable that's going to take a default of the bundle ID that we retrieved from that AIBI dashboard. And now we can use that to filter our data. So we can go ahead and start to review this particular prior auth. So as we can see here, using the variant data type in our bronze table, immediately I can see my entry is an array. I can see that the first array is actually the resource type of claim. I can see that the next entry is actually the resource type of patient and so forth, right? So I can actually start to evaluate this immediately. And when you're starting to use FHIR for the first time, it's really helpful to be able to see the structure in an easy to understand way, such that you can then build your data architecture around it. Excuse me. Okay, so once it's in there, we could start to explode this out. Of course, arrays can be exploded long. So using our variant explode, we can do that. And now I'm able to actually parse the resources immediately into resource types. And I could actually now pull this out. This would make writing that SQL a lot easier, such that now I can know exactly which resource I'm pulling from instead of just using the array of values, which you might have noticed earlier. So what I'll do now is, you could take this to the next step, of course, and you can pivot these things wide. And now we can have one row, per bundle for each of the resources. And again, this now allows you for even easier SQL. So taking that all the way, we can go ahead and create a view using that. This is just an example that for folks that don't know, you can absolutely write dynamic SQL directly in Databricks. The way you would do that is, have other variables that you might have created and then declare and replace a variable that is your statement. And automatically now you've got something that you can execute immediately. So what we've done is we've actually executed this and created a view. And of course, it wouldn't be Databricks if we didn't talk about data intelligence, which means that you can immediately do things like use GenAI functions directly in SQL. So, I want to be able to understand about this particular claim and what the pre-auth is actually for. So, it would be really difficult to go and start to look at all of that bronze information, for example, and, maybe write the SQL. But what I can do is I can start to parse this out and turn it into something that maybe I could send directly to my utilization management nurses or medical directors to make a determination. So here's just an example of some SQL. But what you're going to notice is that they don't actually send the diagnosis code descriptions, right? And they don't actually send what the procedure code description is. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't, just depending on how it might come out with your FHIR JSONs. So it's really hard for me to understand, like, what is this procedure? Should I approve it or not? Like, what is this diagnosis code, right? So using our AI query, we can actually feed in, one of our models that is being hosted on the Databricks model serving, such as Llama 3 70 billion instruct. And we can just tell it a request such as, hey, look up the ICD-10 descriptions based on these diagnosis codes. Again, this is a little bit complicated SQL, but you get the idea, kind of coming all the way back from bronze. And then just, return that in a summary less than 200 characters and so forth. What about the HCPCS code or the procedure code? Like, hey, give me the description for that, right? So I can determine, really easily, maybe, should I even approve this? So I'm going to go ahead and run this SQL. And what's going to happen is that it's actually going to call those GenAI models. And we're going to see this result here in a second. There it is. Took 9 seconds, a little bit because of the AI query. Here's my claim ID. I can see the use now really easily. It's prior auth, when the claim was created. Here's my primary and secondary diagnosis codes, my procedure code, and so forth. And it's a professional claim. Here's the diagnosis code summary, right? So I could easily send this to a care manager who would know what to do with this. I've got 3 diagnosis codes with their description, summary, knee injuries. Turns out this claim was for a car accident or something like that. And there's a requested procedure code that's here. So what is that all about? And I actually asked the GenAI model, give me a little bit more detail here, give me 500 characters. And it's actually gone out and completely, let me know about this procedure code. So I could see that it's actually a request to see something like a specialist. So I could see all of that, including how long it even typically takes to see somebody like this for a patient. Okay, so that's really exciting. But now I want to be able to evaluate that prior auth and actually write it back to Redox such that I can say, hey, you're approved. I think absolutely this is a service that should be approved, and let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm doing now, if I've switched over to another notebook, and unfortunately we're going to use Python now instead of SQL, but we are going to use the exact same schema and catalog that we were using prior. And this Spark read table right here is literally just reading that same exact view we created in the previous step. Okay, so this is exactly the same as the starting point. And now we can know, for example, which resources do we have in our bundle? There are ways to programmatically, account for which resources are in a specific bundle, of course. But for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and write an array for that. And we can actually take the variant data types that you saw before, which again, really did not need to know anything about the particular JSON for those resources. And we can learn the schema using something like our schema of variant. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as an example, this is the actual schema for the claim resource for this particular FHIR bundle. This is helpful then for us to be able to then apply that such that we can then use that for writing out our FHIR JSONs. So after transforming those using the schemas that we received a minute ago, now instead of variant, we've got the full struct types here for things like our claim and our patient. And something like organization, if we look over here, actually is an array of multiple organizations. This is one thing that a lot of folks struggle with FHIR. Multiple locations, the locations reference each other, the organizations reference each other, for example. Or you might have an organization that is, for example, the hospital and the payer, and those are two different organizations, for example. So now we can break that up, and typically at this point, you would be sending this off to your utilization management system. There'd be some sort of review. There may be some machine learning that's going on behind the scenes. But ultimately, that information that's going to, determine, is this approved or not, right? And what is the information we need to send back to the provider such that they know what to do next? So, this step right here is just sort of me hand waving that, like, yes, you would have another table in your silver tables and another schema potentially even that represents your care management or utilization management system. And then you would actually bring that data back in order to be able to use it. So I've just kind of hard coded or grabbed some different things from the actual original FHIR bundle itself in order to create this DF transform now, which is going to contain all of the different resources we originally received, which we may have to send back. We're also bringing in some of the additional things we need to send in our claim response. So a claim response then is going to be something where you receive a service request for a pre-authorization. You then post that back as a claim response with the action respond. And then that will allow us to actually let the provider know about the prior auth being approved. So now that we've got this data here in this table, it's great that it's in a table, but we need to send it to Redox as a FHIR JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and import some of our writer methods and classes from dbignite. And the magic of dbignite with its writing is the ability to just create a mapping, right? So when you say, hey, claim response ID, well, that's in a column in a table called claim response ID, and claim response status, that's in a column in a table called claim response status. And that could be anything. It could be from, lots of different tables or whatever it might be. You don't have to name them exactly what they are, just, kind of helps for, mental note. What I would recommend is that you would have these mappings sort of stored in a file. We call them fixtures. If you are familiar with Databricks asset bundles, you can immediately load these in and apply them. You don't have to write them in the notebook like I'm doing here. This is just a great way to show the demo. So I'm going to go ahead and run the mapping. So I'm going to basically tell it, hey, these are the maps. And I'm going to say, use the mapping manager and apply the maps to the claim response table using its schema. It then understands how to take those data points and then map them specifically into actual FHIR JSONs. So we'll go ahead and do that. And here we're just printing them now so that you can see really easily how it works or how it looks as an actual JSON. So that just takes a second. So this is the claim response resource that I've just created here. I don't know about you, but I would hate to have to try to figure out how to type that manually. And believe me, I've tried and it is not easy. So dbignite makes that super simple. And this does all of the resources that are currently available in R4 and R5. So now we want to send that directly to Redox. So I'm just going to load in some secrets here. So, you know, on the Redox documentation, they've got information about how to use the API, how to get your private keys and public keys and such. So far, all I'm doing right now is just kind of getting my credentials set up, as you can see. And now we have a new accelerator called Redox Write, which was developed internally at Databricks with our partners at Redox and Exponential. Big shout out to Emma Yamada, who's a colleague of mine that helped tremendously with writing this. And we can see that, you know, I'm setting up my auth credentials here as an auth object. It's letting me know I'm successfully able to connect. I then create my Redox API endpoint using my request API. This automatically takes care of everything, such as your short-lived tokens with Redox. And if you need a new one, it automatically goes and grabs it. It's super easy and nice. And we can see that we've got this, this observation here. So I'm going to use this observation just for a complete example of a FHIR bundle. And let's go ahead and post that. So I'm going to post that directly to Redox right now. And it's already done. And let's see if it was successful. Okay. What we're looking for here is a status 200. And we can even retrieve the posted result back using the same make request here. And you know, the beautiful thing about this particular function is that you just say what method, post, you say what resource, in this case, we're using an observation, and then the action that you want to do, right? So for the prior auth, it would be post, you know, claim response, action, $ respond. Here for observation, it's just post observation, $ observation create, and then the data is just your JSON payload as a string. So it could not be any easier to do that. So now let's go back to Redox, right? And let's see what happened. So we can see if we actually posted that back. Let's see if that's real. So I'm going to log right in and look right here. Here's my observation create. I can see my request and I could see it coming into the sandbox, and I could see that it was actually being read as well right here with this. And we can see that that was fully successful. So one last thing, and then we'll wrap it up, is I can go back to my run here and I can see that this is completed. It took 12 minutes to completely, you know, using that file trigger, you saw it be clicked off in Redox. And what's really exciting is that we're able to use, if you're following along with some of that SQL, you can use our new for each task, and you can actually concurrently run many of these different tables here. So we were running 42 at once, and I think there's something like 39 tables. And we can see that all of these succeeded. And you know, this was just built using a lot of dynamic SQL here, like you saw earlier. And if any one of these had failed for whatever reason, we could just repair a task on just the particular ones that failed without having to completely rerun this workflow over or anything like that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Adam and Aaron to close us out. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Matt. Yeah, this has been great. Appreciate everybody being here today. We really appreciate everybody's time and engagement. This has been fantastic. The webinar is going to be closing out here shortly. If you have any questions and would like to follow up with us directly, we'd be more than happy to help support you. Drop a quick note into the poll here, and we'll follow up following the call. Within 48 hours, we'll send out slides as well as recordings. So for our Redox friends, Exponential team, as well as the Databricks team, and everybody who's joined us today, thanks again for investing your time, and hopefully you've taken some information away from us. All right. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Talk soon, everybody. Thank you.